It's that time again, fight fans. I'm Michael Montero for Boxing Monthly. You're watching the Neutral Corner for the week of March 12th. Oh man, this is turning into a crazy busy week. I was on the phone all day interviewing a very high-profile fighter. Can't give any details until the story is out, but more to come on that. And then I'm doing renovations at my house. I'm retiling my bathrooms, and my place is just in shambles right now, and Tiffany's ready to kill me. By the way, Tiffany, I didn't forget about that knockout a couple weeks ago. There's gonna be a rematch, okay? Big trouble in Little China. It's coming. But yeah, you know, crazy week. I'm actually working on a soap opera tomorrow, so I'm gonna go make that money. But all right, let's get to the boxing. Let's talk some news and notes. Okay, so I made a video a few weeks back bitching about the 2016 schedule. They heard me because some big fights, maybe not big fights on paper, but some really great matchups for diehard fight fans are being put together. Let's start locally here in Los Angeles with the LA Fight Club cards that you know I go to all the time. Really fun cards. Well, April 15th, which is tax day here in the United States, where everyone's got to have their taxes in. I just did mine last week, so I'm good. April 15th, Jesus Soto Karass is going up against Yoshihiro Kamagaev in a 10-round, 154-pound fight. I've been ringside for several of these guys' fights. Jesus Soto Karass, he's at almost every fight here in LA, just hanging out in the crowd. Really cool guy. These two are made for each other like peanut butter and jelly. This is a can't miss action fight. And for those of you who don't have Estrella TV, which is where these LA Fight Club cards are televised, no fears. It's streamed on ringtv.com. You want to talk about free boxing for all, right? We talk about some other outlets giving free boxing to the fans. This is free boxing for anyone in the world who has the internet. If you have internet access, you can watch these LA Fight Club cards. And this Soto Karass Kamagaev fight, April 15th, can't miss action fight. Some other fights that have been put together. Look, I've talked about the Lomachenko-Walters fight, and that's been floating around now for several weeks. Still no network worked out, but it's probably going to be June 11th, more than likely Madison Square Garden, and Felix Verdejo will fight as the co-feature. That's right around the Puerto Rican Day Parade in New York. Very smart by Top Rank to put it together that way. Make no mistake, you know, Verdejo is going to be the one who packs the house at the Garden for that fight. But the fight of the night is obviously going to be Lomachenko-Walters. Still don't know what weight yet, but probably 130 pounds. That's a big fight. That's one we've wanted to see for a while. Another big fight put together. Francisco Vargas, who won the Fight of the Year last year, or Fight of the Year candidate last year on the Cotto Canelo undercard. He's going up against grizzled, tough veteran Orlando Salido at the StubHub Center in June. And they're talking about putting James Kirkland against Gabriel Rosado as the co-feature. That's not agreed to yet, but that's probably what they're gonna do. That's another can't miss double header at the StubHub in June. Perfect weather. That's going to be a great one. A rematch between Victor Ortiz and Andre Berto. I'm not particularly excited for this one, but I'll probably watch it. And you know what? It's probably going to be a pretty good fight. Not very meaningful as far as for the winner. You got to figure the winner of that fight will probably get another high-profile title fight, especially maybe in the PBC universe. But their first fight a few years ago was great. So you have to expect, you know, both guys have slipped a little bit. They don't have any defense. Gonna be a good fight right there. Some other news and notes. Guillermo Rigondeaux, you guys know he has a fight coming up over in the UK. He's having visa issues. So I don't know if that fight is gonna fall out. I'm not 100% sure yet if they're gonna be able to get the visa issues worked out. As it stands now, I don't think they're gonna be able to do that fight because he doesn't have his visa issues worked out. And it's not like they can just jump and move that fight at the last second to a totally different country. So big problems for Guillermo Rigondeaux, man. Just the way this guy's career has been handled from the start. He hasn't done himself any favors with the way he's fought and with some of his business decisions outside the ring. Hasn't done himself any favors, but man, this is just career mismanagement. And then Billy Joe Saunders, who turned down a career high payday from K2 Promotions to unify titles with Gennady Golovkin. I believe he was offered over $3 million earlier this year. He turned that fight down. He just announced he's fighting Max Bursic, who is a Russian fighter. I believe he has 3 or 4 losses, not very well known. You have to think he's not getting anywhere near what he was offered to fight Gennady Golovkin. But they're talking about possibly exploring the waters for a unification fight with Golovkin. I believe in July they were talking about, possibly in the summer. If that doesn't happen, obviously, if Eubank Jr. gets past his next opponent, that's probably the fight we'll see, is the Saunders-Eubank Jr. rematch. That's a very, very big fight over there. So maybe Saunders will be in a bigger, more high-profile fight this summer. So let's not jump down his throat just yet. He just did win that title late last year. But that's enough with the news and notes. Let's get to the fight reviews. So last Friday, March 4th, here in Los Angeles, it was another LA Fight Club card. Guys, again, I'm gonna hit on this again. These cards, they're not gonna feature high-profile fighters. These are prospects. These are mostly LA, Southern California-based prospects that Golden Boy Promotions has, that they put on these cards. A lot of bantamweights, a lot of featherweights, it's smaller guys. So it's not everyone's cup of tea. And I get that it's a regional kind of thing. But if you like free boxing and you like good matchups with quality prospects in fights where most of these fights are meaningful for these prospects. They're learning on the job, and you can see that. If you want to see these prospects develop and build up into possibly future contenders, future titleists, you should check these cards out, man. Free on the internet. You can stream them on Ring TV's website. It's usually the first Friday of every month, but Golden Boy has been putting sometimes twice a month putting on these cards, and they're a lot of fun. And some of the guys from these cards are starting to graduate to higher levels. You look at Joseph Diaz Jr., who started on these LA Fight Club cards last year. And by the way, this series just turned a year old. It's still a very new series, and it's still developing and doing better financially and selling better here as far as they're doing sellouts at the Belasco Theater in downtown Los Angeles. But in just that year, Joseph Diaz Jr. is an example of a guy who was on several of those fights, and now he's got a fight against Jason Velez that's going to be on HBO. We're going to see more of that. We're going to see more of these Golden Boy prospects turning into possible contenders in future years. So really cool cards. Be sure to check these out. But the big high-profile fight Friday night was in Kyoto, Japan. Shinsuke Yamanaka scored a unanimous decision victory over Liborio Solis. And this was an exciting fight, man. Yamanaka, I guess he's getting a little older in the tooth. I don't know if making that weight is starting to get to him and he might need to move up in weight. I'm not sure. Could have just been ring rust. But he was knocked down twice in this fight and really had to battle back. He looked pretty hurt. But he actually dropped Solis twice as well. And his class showed over time. It seemed that he kind of worked out that ring rust, got back to boxing, and took control of the fight late and kind of coasted down the stretch. But it was an exciting fight. And I'm telling you, don't sleep on some of these Japanese fighters, man. They're really, really good. Saturday in Grozny, Russia, specifically in the Chechnya region, Lucas Browne pulls the upset special, winning the WBA whatever the fuck title, taking it from Ruslan Chagaev, who basically was the adopted son of this region of Russia. And I watched this fight live. I caught a stream of it and watched it live. It was actually like Saturday afternoon here in LA. It was maybe noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon while I was watching that fight. Really, really solid, entertaining heavyweight fight. No one's calling this Ali Frazier or anything like that, but Chagaev is a quality heavyweight, always has been. Fundamentally very, very sound. Skilled heavyweight who I think at his best would have been a contender in any heavyweight era. Yes, I'm putting it out there. I know some of you old heads, you boxing purists who think the old school fighters were so much better are probably just wanting to punch your computer screen right now. But seriously, you look at Chagaev's build, his skill set, his stance, from the southpaw stance, everything he brings, I think he would have been a contender in any era. Just a solid, good, experienced heavyweight. You look at what Lucas Browne did, man. Going to hostile territory, to the most conservative region of Russia, fighting their adopted son, basically the fighter, the most high-profile fighter in that region of the world, and you're fighting against him in his homeland, adopted homeland. There were political leaders in the crowd. This was totally a showcase setup for Chagaev to win. If you're Browne, you're fighting against a vastly more experienced guy, a guy who has forgotten more about boxing than you even know. And yeah, look, Chagaev, this wasn't the best version of him. He looked pudgy and out of shape, not the best version that Vladimir Klitschko defeated years ago. But it's still Ruslan Chagaev, top 10 quality heavyweight who beats most guys out there on most nights. Browne was knocked down in the 6th round. He was bloody. He had cuts on his face, bruises. Came back to knock down Chagaev in the 10th round and not let up on him. We've seen plenty of fights in recent years where a guy had his man hurt, had his man down, had a chance to pull it out, and just didn't pull the trigger, just didn't follow up on it. And Browne did, right? Here's the thing, at the time of the stoppage in the 10th round, the scores were 88-81 and 88-82 twice for Chagaev. Now, any of you that have seen this fight, it was a close damn fight. I'm not saying it was a draw at that point, but there's no way Chagaev was that far ahead. After 9 rounds, this was a 5-4, 5-3-1 even kind of a fight. And for those scores, that tells you just what I'm saying. The hostile territory, the situation Lucas Browne was in, for him to pull that out, very, very impressive. Now, all that being said, Lucas Browne backs straight up. He keeps his right hand way low. He doesn't punch with very good leverage on his right hand for such a big guy. He doesn't really, he comes from an MMA background and I think kickboxing and that kind of stuff, and those guys just don't know how to punch properly. He's learning on the job. But you can see him thinking in there. You can see him moving well for a guy who's 6'5", for such a big man who's had to sit idle while boxing politics kind of kept him on the sidelines the past 12, 18 months. He was in shape. For a guy that big to stay in shape, look, it's hard to stay in shape when you're over 200 pounds. It's hard for big guys to stay in shape like that. He looked pretty good. He moved very good. You saw him thinking, you saw him making adjustments. You saw him respond very well to adversity. I'm not saying Lucas Browne is an elite level heavyweight yet, but he's definitely a top 10 guy, and he gives any heavyweight in this division a serious challenge. I want to see this guy again. Now, we're not going to see him against Luis Ortiz or Tyson Fury, Klitschko winner, the rematch winner, nothing like that. He is mandated through the WBA, through a court thing that happened last year, to fight Frezzo Kendo. Nobody wants to see that shit, right? Nobody wants to see Frezzo Kendo. He's like herpes. He just won't go away. You know what I'm saying? Not that I would know. I've just heard things, okay? But here's the silver lining on that shitty storm cloud. Browne had to go on the road. He had to wait so long to get his opportunity against Chagaev. You gotta figure him and his people are gonna win the purse bid against Oquendo because Oquendo has absolutely no drawing power. If it goes to purse bid, they might just bring the fight to him anyway. But It's probably going to be controlled by Lucas Browne's people. You got to figure it's going down at Sydney in Australia where he's based. So it's going to be a nice homecoming for him, and he's earned it. He's freaking earned it. So later this year, he fights Fresno Kendo in a big homecoming in front of a big Australian crowd, and he makes some money. Again, he's earned it. But coming over here to the United States in Washington, D.C., Luis Ortiz, who I just talked about, he scored a 6-round knockout over Tony Thompson. He dropped Tony in rounds 1, 3, and 6 before getting him out of there. Now, I've heard some of you be a little critical of Ortiz because he didn't just absolutely destroy this bloated, fat, pudgy version of Tony Thompson, who is 44 years old. But look, in Ortiz's defense, Tony Thompson is a guy that, as I talked about last week, has only been stopped twice, and that was by Vladimir Klitschko. That was by a still very prime Vladimir Klitschko, okay? He's a guy who knows how to survive. He's awkward, he's tall, he's a southpaw. And yes, I know Ortiz is a southpaw, but a southpaw fighting a southpaw, sometimes that gets more awkward than a southpaw fighting a righty, because these southpaws get used to fighting orthodox fighters. That's generally who they're fighting 90% of the time. So the stance and the fact that Thompson kept bending back to get away from the shots and basically just being in survival mode, what do you guys want, right? Ortiz looked like he wanted to go for the kill. He looked aggressive. He didn't cut the ring off very well. He didn't look as fundamentally tight as he looked against Bryant Jennings last year. But he was fighting Bryant Jennings last year. He was fighting Tony Thompson this time. If you looked at Ortiz, he had a little more of a beer belly. He weighed a few pounds heavier than some of his recent fights. So obviously, maybe he fought down a little bit to the level of opposition, but he got Thompson out of there. I don't know what you want from the guy. For Ortiz, 2 concerns I see, okay? One, his age. And I know heavyweights age later, but everyone's different. You know, some guys, you know, they look great until their 40s these days, right? Some heavyweights. But some heavyweights, 38, 39, they get old overnight. We don't know. We won't know with Ortiz, you know, we'll see how it plays out. But the bigger concern for me is he's a little pudgy, right? He came into this fight, I think it was 242 pounds. I'd like to see him closer to 230. Now, not everyone's a body beautiful, and some of the best heavyweight boxers of all time had beer guts. Muhammad Ali had a gut. He was flabby in the midsection. Not everyone's a body beautiful. But in this age of super heavyweights, these big, 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" guys, you want to see them stay in shape year round. And I just wonder if Ortiz is one of those guys who blows up in between fights. That's not good. It doesn't bode well in terms of longevity if you're one of those guys. You look at some of these other big heavyweights, the guys like Klitschko, Deontay Wilder, Bryant Jennings, who I talked about, who isn't that big, but he's a big heavyweight. Some of these other guys, Lucas Browne, they stay in shape. They really look like professional athletes. And that's one thing I worry about with Luis Ortiz, especially because the politics of boxing, he's going to have to fight Ustinov next. That's a WBA mandated thing. He's not going to get a crack at that Klitschko-Fury rematch winner till next year at the earliest, or even maybe Lucas Browne. So he's going to be sitting idle and playing politics, and you know, if he's not staying in shape between fights, that could hurt him. But in the co-feature of that fight, to me, this was really the fight of the weekend, or I don't know. It wasn't the greatest fight ever, but it was an upset special that I called right here. I was proud of that. Jessie Vargas scores a TKO in the 9th round over Saddam Ali. He had Ali down in rounds 8 and 9. And this was a good seesaw battle for several rounds, right? I thought Vargas started well. And then I thought Ali responded well and controlled some of the middle rounds. And then Vargas started to kind of kick into another gear. And A lot of this came down to fighter mentality, fighter toughness, but I think even more than that, everyone's sleeping on the fact of experience. Look, I know Ali had a very decorated amateur career. I know he's had a couple of quality wins in recent years against quality fighters, but those 12 rounds Vargas had with Timothy Bradley last year, and to almost knock him out, right? I don't think he was gonna stop Bradley. I think the fight was stopped 8 seconds prematurely on accident by referee Pat Russell. I don't think he was gonna knock him out in those last 8 seconds. But maybe the mental attitude that left in Vargas of, hey man, I got ripped off. I almost had him out of there. I was about to have a future Hall of Famer out of there and be the first guy to stop him. Maybe that just boosted his confidence or something. But he came into this ring and into this fight with Ali with an edge, man. And I don't know, I just saw it. I just saw something there, and that's how I knew, bet your money on Vargas in this one. And he was a 3-1 underdog. So on top of all that, I gotta say something that's probably gonna piss off some people out there on the East Coast. And, you know, let me be clear, you know, I lived in the Eastern time zone in the United States the first 30 years of my life before I came out here. But the boxers out here on the West Coast now are better than the guys in the East Coast. When you have a guy like Vargas from Southern California, I think he was based in Vegas for a while, but he's from the Southwest region, okay? That really is the hotbed of boxing right now in the United States. And you have a guy like Ali, based out of New York. There was a time, a long time, where New York was really the hotbed of boxing, and the prospects coming out of that region, the gyms there, the sparring, was the best you could get in America. Those days are gone. It's now in the greater Los Angeles, Southern California region. These guys coming out of this part of the country here in the United States. Better gyms, better sparring, better trainers, better conditioning, all of it, all of it. So that's why when I see one of these West Coast guys going up against an East Coast guy, all things being equal, I tend to go with the West Coast guy. Not all the time, but a lot of the time, because I'm telling you, these gyms out here these days are just better. In Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, we had some Showtime or PBC on Showtime action. In the main event, Julian J-Rock Williams scores a 7th round knockout over Italian fighter Montero. And now he's lined up to fight, or I think he's the mandatory for Charlo, for one of the Charlo brothers. And that fight's supposed to happen. It makes a lot of sense. It'd be great to happen on PBC airspace. It'd be great if it happened in the Philly area where J-Rock is from. All that being said, I don't know if it'll happen. We'll see. But Julian Williams, I thought, you know, he looked good in this fight overall because he had a guy in front of him that was awkward, that obviously the disparity in talent and craft was huge. But the Italian fighter did not come to lay down. He was trying his best, making an honest effort. And J-Rock didn't get ahead of himself. He stayed smart. He boxed very, very intelligently. He just broke the guy down and got him out of there. I thought it was a very, very quality performance from him, and he showed a lot of tact in that fight. He's ready for the next level. He's a good-looking prospect, in my opinion. On the undercard, Tony Harrison, a Crump Gym fighter who took his first loss last year to Willie Nelson, he came back with a TKO 6 over Fernando Guerrero, who's just shot the shit and needs to hang up his gloves. He knocked down Guerrero in the 2nd and 6th round. This fight was really just a confidence builder for Harrison. I still don't think he's anywhere near where people thought he was this time last year. They didn't just take him a step back, they took him 2 or 3 steps back. So they're gonna continue to give him some confidence builders. It's gonna take probably for the remainder of this year before he gets to that level that they thought he was gonna be at, where he's ready to maybe contend for a title or something. Gonna take a while, because this fight didn't really prove anything except he can punch, but we already knew that. We still need to see him face some adversity. But the fight everyone's talking about on this card, Antoine Douglas, who was an undefeated prospect, lost via 10th round TKO to, I'm going to butcher this name, man. Kurtzize is the last name. Originally from Georgia, but now lives in Brooklyn. And I don't mean Georgia the state, I mean Georgia the country. This guy, Kurtzize, had Douglas down in the 3rd and 7th round. Now look, the first knockdown in the 3rd was kind of a shocking knockdown, like, whoa, where'd this punch come from? It was reminiscent of when Marcos Maidana dropped Adrian Broner the first time in their fight a couple years back. It was just kind of a, whoa, just came out of left field, you know. Douglas responded well. I thought he actually responded well. He looked out in that 3rd round, but over the 4th and 5th round, he looked good, got his legs back, won those rounds, but he wasn't boxing intelligently. He wasn't clinching when he needed to. He wasn't doing the things that make a fight ugly that we might not necessarily like to see sometimes, but the prospect has to learn to do if he's going to move into contendership. You have to know how to nullify a fighter like Kurtzize, who is this stout little guy that just can't be hurt. Chin is tucked down like this, and dude just comes forward. And he really did look like a mini Mike Tyson. He just kind of walked forward like this, put his head down, and started swinging with good leverage, swinging up at Douglas. And Douglas kind of let himself get drawn into a fight, man. You know, a bar fight at times is what it really looked like. And when he got knocked down in the 7th round, he was on Queer Street. He was messed up. He finished the round. I understand his quarter sending him out for the 8th round just to see what was there, but that fight should have been stopped before the end of the 8th round. Instead, it continued. 9th round, a minute or so into the 10th round, before finally the fight was waved off. And that last, I don't know, 6-7 minutes of action, of beating that Douglas took, might alter his career forever. He just might not be the same guy after this. In fact, he was shipped off to the hospital right after the fight, and that's never a good sign. For a guy this young to take a beating like that, you know, you compare that to Harrison, who I just talked about. Harrison just got knocked the hell out. Quick knockout. Sometimes, actually a lot of times, that's easier to recover from. This beating Douglas took, that alters careers, that changes lives. Much, much harder to come back from. This was negligence from his corner. I also thought the referee could have stepped in a lot sooner. I thought the ring doctor could have acted sooner. Just a complete failure, I think, on everybody involved for letting that fight continue. Guys, we complain about premature stoppages, but better safe than sorry, man. And from all accounts, you know, the medical reports, Douglas is fine, but probably not going to be the same fighter after this. Okay, real quick, some ring action this week in Montreal, Saturday the 12th. David Lemieux makes his return after the loss to Golovkin last year against James De La Rosa in a 10-rounder. And good news for you guys here in the States, this fight will be broadcast on American TV on Fox Deportes, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Western. So be sure to check that out. It'll be interesting to see what Lemieux brings. You know, I thought he accounted very well against Golovkin. Obviously, he was dominated, but everybody is, right? He got in the ring with Golovkin and stayed on his feet. The ref had to come in. I mean, he went down once, but he was with it. He wasn't knocked out. He wasn't basically counted out or anything like that. The ref stepped in and stopped it. And I thought that he had some moments here and there against Golovkin. Definitely some things he can learn from. Definitely I think gained a lot of respect from fight fans for getting in there with Golovkin and actually fighting, you know? So it'll be interesting to see what he has left in this fight with De La Rosa. If he looks good, you gotta figure he's in line for another title shot toward the end of this year with Golden Boy Promotions. But in Liverpool, England, Terry Flanagan is fighting Derry Mathews, defending his WBO lightweight title. This is actually a rematch. These two fought in the prize fighter tournament back in October of 2012 in a 3-rounder. that Flanagan won, and he had dropped Mathews, I believe, in that fight. I want to say like the second round. But it was actually a pretty entertaining scrap during those 3 rounds. You know, those 3 rounders, it's like anything could happen. And even though on paper, you know, Mathews has a bunch of losses. He's 32 years old. He's been in there with everybody. Flanagan is only 26. His trajectory is going up. Even though on paper this looks like a complete blowout, I do think it's going to be a fun fight for a few rounds, considering the history these two have. And Mathews is just a tough guy. But you look at Flanagan, his last 2 fights, okay? He won this WBO lightweight title last July against Jose Zepeda, and then he followed it up with his first defense against Diego Magdaleno in October. Both of those were second-round stoppages. The combined record of those 2 fighters at that time was 51-1. So he's fought 2 quality fighters his last 2 times in the ring and scored second-round stoppages. So it really looks like his career is starting to take off, right? I expect this one to be pretty entertaining for a few rounds, and I expect it to go maybe into the middle rounds, but you just got to think Flanagan's going to chop him down in the middle to late rounds in this fight. But that's pretty much it for the ring action this week. Zab Judah is fighting in Las Vegas. It's his first fight in over 2 years. He's lost 3 of his last 4. I want to say he's going on 40 years old, well past his best. This is another one where, look, Judah's nowhere near as bad as some of the other guys I've talked about in other episodes that shouldn't be fighting. Like, he's got all his faculties, totally healthy, but I don't quite understand this. He doesn't need the money. From everything I know about him, he's done pretty well financially, doesn't need the money. Why do this? I just don't like it. Not gonna watch it. That's it for this week, guys. Let me know what you think about that Douglas fight, man. That stoppage, or you know, the delayed stoppage, and some of this other stuff. And then, you know, Billy Joe Saunders, is he gonna fight Golovkin later this year, or do you think he's just gonna go for the big UK fight against Eubank Jr. and continue to not really mention Golovkin's name, no matter how much money they throw at him? Let me know what you guys think. As always, like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the fights.